All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to join us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Katherine Griffin. I'm the founder of Impactable, a data analytics platform for impact intelligence. I'm joined today by Naledi Magowe, Chief Growth Officer at Brastorne. Brastorne connects the unconnected in Africa. They provide solutions that enable users to access and experience the advantages of the internet without having to incur the hefty costs of a smartphone or data bundles. They've built solutions and services using simple mobile technologies in agriculture, health, education, and legal services to connect the unconnected, and have reached 2 million users in Botswana and the Democratic Republic of Congo. They're focused now on scaling their solutions into 19 African countries to impact over 45 million Africans by 2025. They've received funding from some of the world's leading funds, including the Google Black Founders Fund, Google for Startups, Hyper Internationals, and the Draper Richards Kaplan Foundation, and they're part of the MIT Solver Network. Naledi, thank you so much for being here. We've worked together, of course, for a long time now, and I've long admired you and what your team has accomplished at Brastorne. There are so many things that we could discuss today, but I'd like to have a conversation about your experience with impact measurement specifically. It's, of course, a hot topic in the field and one often discussed among investors. We don't often hear too much directly from founders, though, whose, I think, experience and perspective is most important. But before we get into that, I'd love to just take a step back. Tell us a little bit more about Brastorne and your origin story. What prompted you to build Brastorne with Martin, the CEO, and give us a little bit of a feel for where you are today.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Catherine. So the digital divide is a huge challenge in Africa. Just to give you context, Africa has the highest data charges, but the lowest incomes. And about 80% of mobile users still use feature phones. And this really resonated with us because these are people, and having lived in Africa and being from Africa, these are people that we know, these are family members, these are our cousins and our aunts and uncles in the village, and we've seen the disparities that exist when compared to people living in cities and the access and opportunities that they are entitled to simply because they're connected. All right. So we know that access to the internet is critical in today's world. People can access information, connect with others, tap into new opportunities. And unfortunately, a lot of Africans are left behind, particularly those in rural areas, and don't have access. Which means that they can't access all those valuable, opportunities and all those, wonderful things that come with being connected. So at Brastorne, we believe that internet access is a basic human right. And that is why we are so committed to our mission to connecting the rural poor who can't afford smartphones or data bundles to the life-changing power of the internet. So we currently use technologies that may seem archaic in the first world, but are extremely relevant to the African context, such as SMS and USSD, IVR and voice. And we use these to connect rural populations in 5 countries in Africa. So that's Botswana, DRC, Cameroon, Guinea, and we just scaled into Zambia. And we have reached actually 4 million people through our work in all these countries that we're in. So just wanted to correct that stat that we surpassed 2 million and now at 4 million now. So basically that's where we are right now is we're really focusing on our scale strategy and expanding into new markets and really growing the business into other territories.
That's extraordinary. Congratulations. Let's talk a little bit about impact measurement and management. You obviously serve millions of users and are in the process of expanding. As Chief Growth Officer, what role has impact measurement and management played in fueling your growth? How have you used impact measurement and management to get where you are today, if at all?
Yeah, so our journey is interesting, and this is because our work by nature is impact driven,
Mhm.
right? So we have impact just by virtue of existing as a business. And because we knew that our business was naturally impact driven, we sort of focused more on high level business metrics. So things like revenues and acquisition and just other unit economics and the like. But further along in our growth trajectory, we started to work with more mission aligned partners, and we wanted to expand our impact. It became really apparent that there was a need for us to drive a lot more focus towards actually assessing the impact and effectiveness of our solutions at a deeper level on our customers and our user base. So it became not only about knowing who we're impacting and how many people we're reaching, but now about how we're actually enriching their lives through our work. And it became more apparent as we started raising capital because, we really started, focusing heavily on courting investors and raising capital. And so the type of investors that we were looking at were mainly impact investors. And, because we heavily align with them and their mandate, it made so much sense for us to invest in impact measurement.
Mhm.
And since doing so, we have merged it into our storytelling. It became sort of a strategic lever in the things, in the work that we do, and has been incredibly powerful in the way that we use it for storytelling. And it's been really compelling to our partners. It brought a lot of validation and it helped demonstrate that our work does indeed have an impact and it's valid. So it really, really played a huge impact in our storytelling. It attracted the right partners. It gave them that much more confidence to want to work with us and support our work.
Wonderful. Delighted to hear that because I think the question is often like, what is the business case for impact measurement and management? Are we doing this from a compliance perspective just to kind of appease our investors, or does this actually create real business value? And so it's wonderful to hear your experience in that way. When it first started, was it really investor driven? I mean, you and your team have been so intrinsically motivated, and I know that impact, true impact is such a priority for you. Um, when it started, was it really investor driven, or did your team decide on your own that this would be important to do? I guess what
Mhm.
started the process that has now clearly evolved into something that you leverage across business functions?
Yeah, well, I mean, investor requirements have played a role in shaping our IMM practices, but our primary motivation does come from within. Like I
Mhm.
mentioned, the work that we do is really heavily focused on impact, and we see impact measurement not just as a necessity, but as a fundamental part of our mission. It's just that what made it so tricky for us is that we didn't have the capacity or the internal capability for us to really focus on it and have a go at it, right? So we understand and we believe that impact measurement is critical for us understanding our effectiveness and ensuring that we are making a real difference for our users and we're refining our products in a way that enriches their lives. And it also just helps us stay true to our mission and continuously improve.
Mhm.
Another important thing I just wanted to add here is that, as a startup, you have very limited resources. And a lot of the time, it's best to focus on your core functions. And some activities are better outsourced to people who are the best at doing them, right? So in our case, since we didn't have, full-time internal impact measurement resources, we were so thankful to have access to you, Catherine, and then your team because it really helped us kind of focus on what we're good at and then have the true experts really assist us on impact measurement. And it's really been helpful because there's been a lot of collaboration with our teams, a lot of hand holding on your side, as well as knowledge sharing to facilitate the process and for us to kind of take ownership of the process and continue it even without, you being there all the time. It has led us to kind of then focusing on creating, structured processes internally to track our impact And again, this is something that's, we've never really been good at, and we hadn't had the internal capacity and haven't specifically recruited for. So we've continuously, learned a lot, and we are still learning a lot and refining our strategy and the way that we approach impact. And a lot of that is to do with the work that we're doing together.
Yeah, that's great. And that leads me into the next thing I want to talk about. One of um, sort of the refrains that I hear in the field a lot, particularly from investors, is concern about overburdening founders, portfolio companies, right? We're already requesting so much financial information. We don't want to go through the process of, now requesting and then working hand in hand with founders to provide impact information as well. Um, are you getting survey requests from investors as well? Have they asked you what metrics you use and sort of accepted those? Presumably, you've shared your reports with investors. Do they dig into that with you? I guess, um, do you feel like your relationships with impact investors around impact measurement, management, and reporting is a burden?
I wouldn't say it's a burden, because I understand the logic. We understand why it's so important to them because they do have a focus on impact as part of their theses as investors. So for us, it really just helps us align, and it helps us kind of measure what's important both to us and to them.
Mhm,
And so as part of the process, yes, we do have the conversation around impact, and the work that we've done together has helped us have a lot of confidence in the way that we approach those conversations. We do share the metrics that we're looking at, and a lot of times, before we even get to due diligence, they already are aware of these metrics, and they already align with the metrics that they're interested in impacting through their investment.
mhm,
So a lot of times we would have already agreed upon the metrics. They're aware of the metrics that we're tracking, and they also have a keen interest in them. And so it makes the conversation quite easy to approach. And what we have done just to make the process easier is we try to have a proactive approach to kind of be a step ahead of the investors that we're dealing with by embedding this into our operations.
mhm,
So we have, regular data collection and, analysis embedded into our routine, which helps us just monitor the key metrics. So we had, long defined the metrics that we want to focus on, and then select the key major ones that we believe we drive the most impact on. And we have our researchers and in our team who constantly do, surveys and collect baselines and impact data, which will
mhm.
then eventually feed into an impact report. So our plan is to really just check these metrics on a monthly and quarterly basis. And so then we're able to actually then make an assessment maybe 1 to 2 times a year to see if really the needle has moved through our work.
Okay. Wonderful. And that was one of the questions I wanted to ask as well, just around operational capacity, right? Resources are so low for our startups, as you mentioned. And so what processes can founders put in place to really streamline it? And it sounds like you guys have really hit your stride around that. Um, can you give us an example of some of the metrics that you're tracking and why? Just to sort of maybe bring this to light for some of the folks with us today.
Okay, so through the work that we've done with Impactable X, we've built a model, right, an impact model, which allows us to see, the metrics that we have the most effect on as a business.
Hmm.
And so this can include, for example, in our work in agriculture, improved yields, improved incomes, and then improved yields for female farmers and improved incomes for female farmers, specifically, focusing on the gender aspect.
Hmm.
And then we also look at in our work with health, it's improved access to, health information and, improved, visits to the clinic. So basically, the information that we've given you through our platforms, was it helpful enough for you to then make a decision to lead you to visit a clinic and receive care? Basically, we want to see the impact of the information and the access to markets that we facilitate on our platform, if it then enables our users to then make a decision to improve their lives. So does
Mhm,
the information that we provide on our agricultural platform help improve your yields as a farmer?
mhm,
Does your participation in our mobile marketplace help you increase your incomes, for
mhm,
example? So those are some of the metrics that we're looking at. And when we are having engagements and discussions with investors, they are already aware of that very
mhm,
early on in our due diligence process.
mhm. Brilliant, brilliant. I want to just put a finer point on that for any other founders in with us today. So with Brastorne, we'll look at, average crop yield, or we'll look at, number of people accessing healthcare information, or with a mobile store, right? And then from there, we can look at the degree to which it increases, um, or in some other cases for other metrics might decrease, right? For another company, it might be energy usage, maybe it's decreasing, but we'll look at that delta, and draw from third party research and data to predict any outcomes that might result from that change. One of the questions we received in the chat, thank you, Yuande, I think is really important. Like who pays? I think this is a bigger conversation in the field. And so she asked, did investors or other supporters provide initial funding for IMM, or was there any contribution from Bracethorn at the outset? Um, you know, Folks are wondering, is there a role for philanthropy to pay for this? Should the investor pay? Should the team pay? So what are your thoughts there? What's your experience?
Um, well, we paid because it was just that important to us. All right. We saw the value. We saw it as an investment, rather than, as an expense. It really has really shaped our storytelling. It has made it easier for us, to get the funding that we've gotten because we have proof in the pudding, and this can be shown through our impact metrics. So we paid for it. Yeah, it's just as simple as that. We saw it as a value add.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Um, can you share anything you might, any guidance you might have for folks in terms of how how you'd suggest they begin, or how they can really extract the most value out of this? I mean, really, I talk to investors and founders all around the world all the time, and I think the predominant understanding of impact measurement and management is really around compliance and reporting, And so, of course, our goal at Impactable is to create value for founders, for companies. You're already so busy doing extremely important work. How can we give you more tools to grow, to scale more efficiently and effectively? But I think that this isn't the predominant view in the market. And so, are there any tips you might have, whether it's about, strategy going into impact measurement and management, or the use of, maybe a report in order to unlock maybe access to new partners, or drive sales, or build a community around integrity, or of course fundraising? Is it really about just finding the investors who are best aligned, as it sounds like you did?
Yeah, I think that one of the most important thing that you could do is really, like I mentioned earlier on, we didn't really have a primary focus on impact measurement in the beginning because we're just really so focused on driving growth and focused on
Mhm.
higher business, metrics. So I would just suggest that going into impact measurement, it's really important to educate yourself about IMM, really get to understand what impact measurement is all about. And then when you go into, to working with partners like Impactable X, you kind of go into it really understanding what the expectations could be and what the value that can be derived from it. And so that you can understand how to how to basically participate and contribute in a meaningful way to the project. But so I think the most important thing is just understanding, in educating yourself and understanding why it's so important, the value of it and what you can get out of it. This will really make it easier to then continue, engaging, partners when it regards to, impact measurement, as well as approaching your work with partners like Catherine. So education is really, really important.
I couldn't agree more. I think taking a strategic perspective is also really important, not only regarding, the growth of your organization, but also, what's critical path immediately, and I often see that the perfect can be the enemy of the good, right? So like you might want to track 20 different, 50 different metrics, but like what are the top three that you can really prioritize that are catalytic, and that if they're not true, the rest of your impact thesis falls apart, right? And then evolve and expand and build over time. Um, as you grow. I also think, impact for market-based social innovation is often the core value proposition, right? It's often why partner with you, why customers buy your product, right? Why investors invest. And so um, it can be immensely valuable when you go to customers and be able to say, this is the degree to which we improve outcomes, or this is the degree to which we can drive resource efficiency, and this is the value of that economically for you and your organization. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So Margaret asked a question about the abundance of indicators, which is sort of along the same lines. Can you give any advice on the process of narrowing down indicators to best fit goals, to streamline processes for small, busy organizational teams, and collecting and managing that data?
Yeah, it goes back to exactly what you just said, Catherine, is, your work can impact, so many indicators. You just have to really be very selective and focus on the most important ones.
Mhm,
Focus is really, really important. So just really just trim them down and focus on the key metrics, focus on the most important things really that drive, the what is it called? The 20% that drives the 80% change
mhm, mhm,
is what you want to focus on. And then you kind of then streamline all your activities to making sure that you kind of track and monitor that on a continuous basis.
mhm. And this can be easier said than done. And so it's helpful to have some objective perspective and guidance on this, because when you're deep in it, everything can feel really important. And it
Yeah.
might not be clear what metrics are in fact catalytic for impact. And what I mean by that is like, um, we work with one company, they distribute clean water via water ATMs. And so you can look at liters of water distributed, but the impact really comes from like households, number of households gaining access to clean water. And so you can look at both of those metrics, but one's going to be catalytic and one's going to kind of just be um, an activity, right? And so um, I think it's helpful first to start with a theory of change. If you're not familiar with that term, I'm happy to send out some more information about it. But basically, like what is the problem? What is your intervention, quote unquote? What are the activities that you do, the outputs, the outcomes, and the systemic change, the end. So it's sort of this longitudinal view, but it's really important to understand what those key impact metrics are that then drive the outcomes that, get you out of bed every day in the morning, right? Um, Another great question from Yuande around ESG. So do you also consider ESG factors? Do you have an ESG strategy? How does ESG considerations factor into impact objectives? And happy to talk a little bit more about the difference between the two, if that would be helpful. But want to give you a chance to respond, Naledi.
Yeah, that would be extremely helpful, Catherine, because that is something that is new for us. We
Yeah.
haven't really explored ESG. It's something that we're looking into. It's just came up actually as an investor requirement. So it's something that we're going to invest some resources and time and effort into as a company.
Yeah.
So we're just very, very new into it.
Which is interesting. You've prioritized impact over ESG, and often I see the reverse happening actually. So ESG fundamentally is about risk mitigation. In practice, it's often operational, right? So it might be um, number of employees, might be diversity or demographics among employees or your board. Do you have a policy in place for, learning about forced labor in your supply chain, right? And so it tends to be much more operational. The two are often referred to as ESG or an impact or ESG risk and ESG value, right? ESG stands for social, environmental, and governance. And so some look at it from the perspective of risk versus value creation, and impact is all about value creation, right? And so that's why it's framed that way. But I think the two terms get conflated often, and there can be a lot of confusion around it. ESG, was originally developed for public companies, right? And it's really mostly talked about from a risk mitigation perspective when referring to the public market. In the private market, it's much more sort of operational. But I'm sure you know how many employees you have and the demographic breakdown among them, right? And so uh, I think the way Yewande worded this around strategy again is just really important. What ESG metrics are important for us strategically to grow. But these kinds of things, you'd mentioned investing some resources into them. Given what you all have done on the impact side, feels relatively minor by comparison, you know? I could be wrong. But, well, how does your supply chain come into this? Are you in touch with different suppliers? Do you think about who you're partnering with and the kinds of work that they're doing, you know?
Yeah. So partners are a big piece of what we do.
Mhm,
Obviously as a startup, you can't do it alone. You need to work with aligned and mission aligned partners.
mhm,
So when we look at our partners, we look at partners that can help advance the impact that we're having. We look at partners that are already serving our target beneficiaries or our target user bases and people that we can easily access through partnering with them. And then we also look at partners that serve the same demographic through different services or products that they may have. And so what we try to do through our work is to build that into an ecosystem where our user can basically interact with these different, in different partners in different ways, depending on what their needs are. But I will be honest in that when it links to ESG, again, we are very new to this and we're still, wet behind the ears and still exploring and learning, and we're still planning about how we're going to divert, resources to this and expand, into strategy and all of that. So I'm very honest in that it's very new. We've been focusing mainly more on impact measurement and IMM.
mhm. Great, thank you. Um, I want to go back to something you touched on a bit in passing, which is around sort of the tactical operational components of this, of actual data collection. This is something that I hear some companies struggle with. And I've seen a number of different approaches to it. You had mentioned that you use surveys and you collect data from the field. Are there any tools that you're using, and how do you decide which approach to take for different metrics?
Okay. So for us, what makes our landscape very challenging for us, being in Africa, is that a lot of information is really hard to find online. So it makes it extremely difficult to set baselines. So a lot of that work, we would literally have to go and interact with, farmers or, our users directly through surveys or interviews. And luckily for us, we have an in-house contact center, and we also use our IVR technology, which enables us to, conduct surveys via voice, where, for example, a user would get a call, an incoming call, and they're able to respond to questions. And we can also embed this into our products, our USSD, through USSD or SMS. So the technology makes it easier for us to collect the data through it, and we just use it sort of as a data collection engine to help us basically set those baselines that we've really, really struggled to find through secondary research.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think really wise. Wherever we can just embed data collection in user interfaces anyway. And so, you get a pop-up and you respond to a question. How much, crop yield uh, did you experience this month, um, is a way to really streamline this. Um, so that it doesn't all need to be manual or disaggregated, right? It can be centralized and fed into some sort of core um, database, which then can be analyzed in different ways. It's always what I recommend for startups. I think, there are a variety of different tools now emerging. I mean, geospatial satellite technology has been around for a while and is, I think, increasingly accessible for folks. Survey technology, of course. There's a company now that will actually collect qualitative data using AI from end, you know, users to understand how a particular product or service is changing their lives. So there are a variety of different tools, and it sounds like you guys have just really designed um, workflows that fit seamlessly with the services you're providing.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone ahead and just really created a dashboard that speaks specifically to impact. So
Mhm.
before we would just focus again on high level business metrics. So now we've kind of separated impact and just given its own place where data can be fed into it, and we can continue to monitor that on a regular basis.
Mhm. Um, what is on your radar for the next year or two? Are you fundraising? What's your perspective on the funding market right now? Um, this is, of course, a big question in the field, and a lot of founders are struggling. And so wanted to see where you are and what you might recommend.
Well, for us, we just closed the deal. I can't really speak a lot about it currently. I'm not allowed to, which is really good news, and it's going to help us expand our impact. And I think the major focus in the next year is really going to be deploying those funds and scaling into new markets. The market is quite volatile right now, so we're really not looking to raise equity at the moment.
Mhm.
Our focus really has been more on debt or just any other non-dilutive capital, just because we have, we've been able to bootstrap and we've done very well with that. And we wanted to really prove our model in more markets before then, raising equity so that we can raise at a valuation that makes a lot more sense, having proven our model in a lot more countries. So
Mhm.
right now, we have kind of hit our target in terms of what we wanted to raise in terms of non-dilutive capital, and we just really focusing on deploying that. Our biggest project right now is just really deepening our impact in Zambia. We just expanded there. We're doing some work with Heifer International and really focusing on impacting farmers. We're also doing some work towards expanding into Madagascar as well.
Mhm.
So in the next year, we have basically two countries that we're really working hard towards getting into.
Incredible. I know you've worked with MIT Solve and with Facebook Accelerator and with Heifer International and with Google. What was your experience working with those organizations? Are you still in touch with them? Um, what resources, you know, do you look to them to provide, if any? Um, and what role did they play in you getting here?
They are really important partners. We have had really great relationships with them. I'd say the biggest impact they've had was really in validating our business, right? If you have a Google that believes in the work that you do, it's going to be so much easier for the next partner or an investor to believe in you too, because it brings a layer of validity. So, excuse me, it's been so impactful in helping us really expand our reach in terms of our partners and have more people on board supporting our mission. It's also been really important in capacity building. They bring, there's a lot of access to, their network and a lot of experts, a lot of, partners and, potential talent as well. And so it just goes beyond just the funding that they give, but there's a lot of capacity building and resources and tools that they support with. And I would recommend any entrepreneur to pursue those relationships. So it should also I'd recommend that it should go beyond just the program. So try and really build the relationships within these communities. And a lot of the times, even after the program, people will still think of you, they'd still recommend you for opportunities, and they become a friend, to your business and to you, and they become evangelists on your behalf. So it's been incredibly impactful and so helpful to have them as part of our journey.
That is excellent advice. Are there any other questions from folks with us today? Feel free to come off mute and ask Naledi directly. Well, wonderful. Naledi, this has been so fascinating, and I think really helpful for folks. Any last sort of words of advice, whether it's to the other founders or whether it's to the impact measurement and management field more broadly, um, that you'd like to leave us with?
I'd say focus on your why, right? Your impact, it really is what helps you measure your why, like why you're doing what you're doing or what you're trying to achieve. It's the heart of your startup or your business or the impact that you're trying to make in your world. So take it seriously and prioritize it. And the earlier that you do that, the better it becomes, as part of your journey, and you can really make a difference in this world and, have the right people come along with you on that journey.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. This was a pleasure.